Welcome to the Shame Free Sex podcast. I'm your host, Brielle Starr from shamefreesex.com. By tuning in today, you are taking your next bold step towards fully embracing your authentic sexual self, absolutely shame-free. It's time to take your power back from shame and experience the life of your dreams, both in the bedroom and beyond. Let's embark on this transformative, shame-free journey together. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another fabulous episode of the Shame Free Sex podcast. Today, I am joined by the lovely Dianne Shepherd. Dianne runs a sacred feminine mystery school where she helps women reclaim the sacredness of their bodies and the power of their pleasure so they can embody the goddesses they were born to be. In today's episode, Dianne is going to be sharing about sexual and spiritual goddess rebirth at midlife. What does she mean by goddess? What does she mean by rebirth? I don't know. I'm excited to find out, and you're going to have to just keep listening if you want to find out as well. So I am so excited to have you here, Dianne. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Oh, I am thrilled to be here, Brielle. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'm so thrilled, as I already mentioned, to have you here today and talk about this beautiful topic that I think is really important to discuss for women and hear about all this magic that can happen in midlife compared to perhaps the misconceptions that we hear growing up or even in
Yeah.
present midlife for anyone who's there. But before we get into that, I'd love if you could get started by just sharing with us about your own personal sexual and spiritual rebirth. What happened for you when you were going
Yeah.
through menopause?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Well, I went through menopause a little bit earlier than a lot of women do. It started at about age 40, and as you know, many people know it's a process. But yeah, and I was shocked actually that it was menopause. I was like, wait, I'm only 40. But yeah, it kind of hit me like a freight train. I have three sons, and they were still quite young at the time. My youngest was 7 then. But in the busy parenting life, I never really truly addressed some of the issues of pelvic floor issues that came up after, giving birth. And anyway, when menopause hit, with the hormonal shifts, I imagine those issues really came screaming to the forefront. And with that also were a lot of emotional charge. There was a lot going on for me, my marriage too. I was like, what's going on? I felt like I lost the plot on my life in so many ways. And again, I love being a mom, but I was really busy running that mom taxi, not really caring for myself, and definitely not even thinking about my sexuality or sensuality at that time. And yeah, so I just had this kind of meltdown, right? And I just started asking questions, and some of the answers I was getting from one specific doctor who didn't sit well with me at all. She was a woman, had this attitude like, "Oh yeah, it's the beginning of the end. What do you expect? You're drying up." And of course, she had remedies for that, but I was really interested in more natural approaches. So at the time, I was listening, or not listening, I was reading. This is back in the newsletter in the mailbox days. Christiane Northrup, Dr. Northrup's newsletter. And she has always been a pioneer with women's health for me, especially back in the day. And she started talking a lot about pleasure and sensuality and how it affects every area of our lives, our health, our well being in general. Very holistic approach. And so I got curious. I was like, what's going on? And then she started mentioning this woman in Manhattan. I live in upstate New York, who ran a school for women, a goddess school, basically, all about sensuality and pleasure. And that was Regina Thomas Hauer. And her school, Mama Gina is her stage name, Mama Gina School of Womanly Arts. And so I was at first really kind of frightened about it. What should I do this? But then I just jumped in with both feet, and I was so glad I did, because all these doors opened for me of just different practices, ways of being in the world that I had no clue. And some of those practices, I ended up really diving deep with some of the Taoist sexual yoga practices and the tantric practices that really moved the needle for me and changed everything. And yeah, especially the jade egg practice is one of the practices, the core practices we work with in my containers. And it was such a game changer, Brielle. Like, all of my pelvic floor issues healed. I was having incontinence, pelvic pain, really bad dryness, low level of pelvic organ prolapse. But it all turned around once I started to engage in these more holistic practices. And it's not even the practice, it was more about the paradigm shift, right? Of just seeing myself differently, caring for myself differently, and really aligning with a pleasure infused lifestyle, I guess you could say. Yeah, but taking my pleasure seriously. Mm,
I love that last line, taking your pleasure seriously. That's awesome. And
yeah,
it was amazing to hear a little bit about your journey and all of the things that you didn't know about that suddenly became such a prevalent part of your life, and even the work that you do now.
yeah,
And as you were sharing, I know you mentioned Mama Gina's school, and I've read her book, Pussy, A Reclamation. I love that book.
such a good one.
And yeah, and I know a lot of the examples that she shared about in the book, and a lot of the people that she worked with were women who were in later stages of their life or in midlife. And a
Yeah.
lot of these women aren't finding these resources or aren't beginning this type of sensual exploration until they reach midlife. Do you think do you have any thoughts on why that might be, or why it's taken this long for so many women to be able to really open up and explore and find what they're looking for?
Oh boy, that's such a great question. Yeah, I feel like we live in a society that is so pleasure negative, right? It's like the initiation we never got. And I think at midlife, especially menopause, I think the veil drops in so many ways. It's like things get so bad, so you start looking and asking deeper questions, perhaps, where you can get by and you know something's off. But like for me, when I hit midlife, I was like, no, this is not okay. There's got to be more. And that seems to be the statement I hear a lot with women when they find my work. They're like, "Yeah, I did some physical therapy for my pelvic floor stuff and that was helpful, but I know I have a hunch there's more. Where's the more? I really want that more." And I was like, "You're spot on. There is so much more." And I feel that probably in the busyness of a woman getting her career going in her younger years, and my sons are in that stage now, having children, diving into parenting if they choose that, or even having a dog, and just getting busy. It's so easy to not pursue something that's not offered in the mainstream. And I think when a woman gets to be, in her 40s or 50s, she's just is like, wait, I'm not ready to be put out to pasture. And this kind of anger comes up, honestly. There's like this rage, right? And one of my teachers in the Mama Gina school, her name was Ann Davin, but she said, rage is passion without a place to play. And I was like, oh my God, that was exactly what I was feeling. A lot of resentment in my marriage. And I didn't even know why. He's a great guy. We went to college together. I was like, what's missing? But of course, blaming it all on him. And so, but until I started taking responsibility for my own pleasure, and I almost feel like it's such gold, really, the challenges that we go through in relationships. It almost ends up being the raw material that we can alchemize into something really powerful in our later years. Um, yeah, yeah, I hope that answers the question because, yeah, there's, I think, multi layers. And I think that society, again, isn't fully embracing the real deal when it comes to female pleasure and sensuality and sexuality. And there's a lot, it's so weird, isn't it? Because it's so overly sexualized in some ways.
Yeah.
But for a woman to really own her own innate power in this way, it still seems to be challenging to, yeah, find what you need. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, you answered that really beautifully. Thank you
Mhm.
for diving
Okay.
in there a little bit. And yeah, it is societally we are, at least in in America, it is very over-sexualized. So many things are
Mhm.
over-sexualized. And yeah, it's interesting with that being said, at the same time, so many women feel so disempowered about their sexuality and, like you
Yeah.
said, don't feel power around their sensuality and their sensual power. And there are
Mhm.
so many distractions that can keep us from exploring that. So I could totally see how, yeah, you get to a point in your life when it
Mhm.
starts to become even more important to really recognize what's going on within and to
Yeah.
finally, take back your power and explore. And so I'm excited to hear even more about it throughout the course of today. And
Yeah.
I know that you talk about both sexual and spiritual rebirth. And I'm wondering your perspective. Was this rebirth that you personally went through, or perhaps even the people you work with, do you feel like it was something that you chose and you walked into, or was it more something that you just naturally felt drawn to and it was probably going to happen no matter what you did? Like, did it happen more to you, or do you think you chose it? If you have any thoughts about that.
Ooh, that's juicy. I like that. I think it was a choice. Yeah. Yeah. I think there's that point where I had to really say, like, I'm a sensual being and pleasure is essential. And without choosing that, it's like you choose an identity around it, really, right? This new identity in a sense that has always been there, but just kind of buried. But just honoring that and claiming that like pleasure is essential, I think is a really important first step for a lot of women because without that choice, it's going to be so easy to not show up for, say practices that'll get you there or just different lifestyle choices, taking breaks during your day, things like that, the simplest things. It could be so easy to run yourself into the ground and, in terms of, say, yin and yang, masculine, feminine energy that we all have inside of us, I think we have an overly yang society, especially in the United States. And women, like, we want to be successful, we can dive in there pretty hard, which is great. We can slay it. Which is awesome. And
Yeah.
I think feminism is fantastic. And, I stand on the shoulders of giants, and we're having this conversation because feminism happened, right? And, yet it's like it really liberated the masculine in us, and I'm 62 now, so I've been witnessing this for a long time. Um, but the feminine is kind of a mystery, and I don't think it has been truly embodied and truly presenced on the planet in over 3,000 years, to be honest. It's like when the more patriarchal cultures came in, that was the first thing to go, the first thing to be demonized, right? Was that. And so much was lost, I think. And it is that reclamation of choosing, yeah, pleasure. And I know femininity can be a scary word for a lot of women. But yeah, choosing your own version of that. That's so important to get to. That there's definitely no cookie cutter. There's no one way to be feminine. And we don't want to give up our masculine either. It's more of a synthesis of, what does that look like for us? Where do we find that beautiful, kind of sexy dance between those energies where it feels amazing. There's this like inner marriage that happens in the
Mhm.
process. But I think it is something initially, it's so important to choose it because if we don't choose it, again, it's going to be really hard to make those lifestyle changes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wonderful. Oh, I love that answer. And I also really appreciate you bringing up this idea of femininity and what that could possibly mean to people. I know there's a lot of ideas when we speak about the word femininity that we might think of weak or,
Yeah.
just things like that that are definitely around there. Or then the other side of things, which is just wearing skirts or I don't know.
Yep. Yep.
There's all these different things. And so I'd love if we could dive in a little bit deeper there. Could you tell us about what femininity means
Mhm.
to you? I know you said it differs for everyone, and we can kind of create our own understanding and definition of what that means, but could you share a little bit about what
Yeah.
that looks like or feels like for you?
Oh, I love that. Yes, because I think we have so much evidence around that's performative, right? Like just put some lipstick on it.
Yeah, I'm wearing a dress now, I'm feminine.
Right, exactly. Which can be really fun, but if it doesn't come from the inside out, right, from your essence. And what I like to say, it's all about embodiment, right? It's really about practices that bring you into your own direct experience of what the feminine is to you. And that's where it gets tricky because it's not like I can bullet point it in a sense, but like it's more about like, yeah, like what it's more like guiding women home to. We start with breath work. We work a lot with what I call sensual breath work of like breathing to receive, and coming into that part of you. And it's amazing how quickly you can experience a personal paradigm shift just by breathing to receive. Like I love essential oil, so I put on some rose oil before the interview, and if I could just, really receive that, it changes. And like I shift into the feminine, And it's that receptivity, that that softness. Again, softness can be a scary word for a lot of women. I get it. But again, it requires safety, like really creating safety in the nervous system where we feel safe enough to receive, feel safe enough to really receive the breath, feel safe enough to really savor your latte in the morning, and just, can you let that bring you pleasure? Can you receive that pleasure? And it's somewhat of a lost art. It could take a little practice, but once a woman like dials into that, it's incredible to see how quickly her energy changes. And then the work becomes like, oh, how do I integrate this into my masculine too, where I'm slaying it and I've got my career going. Like, how do I weave it in? And one of my clients, I love this, she says, like, how do we fold it in? How do we fold it in? And that becomes like the work in a sense, right? But we can microdose, but yeah, it's definitely a felt, embodied sense of this essence that comes alive when we are in that receptive mode of, you know, and it's so counter to, I think, what a lot of us have been taught, that we have to go for it, we have to, make it happen. And then you start to taste what it feels like to magnetize, and just be in your pleasure, and the magic that can happen around a woman when she chooses that. It doesn't mean you don't get to go for it and make things happen too, but you get more agency, and yeah, more of a larger palette to play with, in a sense of thinking of like an artist, right? You get to paint with a larger palette in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. I love that. I love the way that you described it. And you mentioned this idea of safety and feeling safe enough to receive and to be
Mhm.
open to receiving. And does this safety fully come from within? Does that is that fully an inside job, or are there outside factors that can play into that, do you think?
Well, yeah, it's like nothing happens in a vacuum, so being aware of, what's going on in the world and how much we're taking in. And I think that's part of it too, of really becoming more of an Epicurean of what you're taking in, being a lot more discerning. We work with a lot with the archetype of Venus Aphrodite in my work. And one of the key things I always tell women about Aphrodite, Venus, is discernments, discerning what you're taking in terms of news and media and social media. And all of that can really have a huge impact on our nervous system, and it could be really fun, to connect with people and everything. But it just, if we don't take the reins on that, I feel like we don't even realize that we're constantly putting ourselves in a place in the nervous system that is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And the real magic happens when a woman, it is an internal decision, but again, the outer world, affects us. But if we can start to, curate a life where we do feel safer and we create that safety for ourselves, we can come into that state of the nervous system where we're actually able to receive pleasure. We're able to digest our food better. We're able to digest life better. We can respond rather than react, and we're available for intimacy, connection, and even true compassion. And like when women land in that space of the, technically it's called the ventral vagal part of the nervous system, right? Polyvagal theory. Oh, this exhale happens, and it's like she could actually taste her true sensuality. Yeah, which doesn't happen in that reactive state of the nervous system, the more sympathetic. So a lot of it is nervous system work. I know that sounds dry, but it's actually really juicy when
Mhm.
you start to, yeah, care for the nervous system, know what resources you, every woman's different. For some, it might just be, a walk in the park, or a hot bath, or whatever. It changes day to day, but just having that as a priority is so important. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I love how you emphasize that as a priority. And yeah, it's really interesting to hear about that. It's always fun to realize how many different things play into our sensuality and sexuality that we don't necessarily think of or we don't connect in our heads. Like, I
Right.
imagine many of us
Mhm.
aren't sitting around like, yes, I need to work on my nervous system, and that will also improve my sensuality and sexuality. I would imagine that's something we're not considering unless
Yeah.
we hear it and learn about it. So that's a fun little tidbit to obtain for today.
Yeah, it's so key. Like, if you're watching things that freak you out, like on TV, it's like going to be hard to shift gears and actually receive, right? So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've covered a lot of different aspects today. We've talked a bit about that sexual rebirth that you experienced, and we've talked about femininity. And I know one word you use a lot in your work is the word goddess, like a
Yeah.
goddess rebirth. And I would love if you could tell us about what the word goddess specifically means to you, if it has any ties to femininity, like in itself,
Hmm.
what you've already shared, just whatever you'd like to tell us about, why you use the word goddess and why you share this
Goddess.
goddess work.
I love that. Yes, and that was the big awakening for me. In the Taoist tradition, they call it second spring, where a woman has this rebirth of spiritual and sexual. And yeah, really tasting our divinity and reclaiming the body as sacred is a big part of my work. And we find it through pleasure. It's the opposite of what many of us have been taught about sacredness, right? And it's so different in the feminine because it is about pleasure. It is about sensuality, and sexuality is a part of that, but even more ownership of our own sensual being as being divine. That's why I use the word goddess, because once a woman wakes up, her body in that way, her pleasure in that way, and really say awakens her breasts, for example. Our breasts are like so powerful spiritually, and we don't even think about it, right?
Yeah.
So connected to the heart. Like everyone's about heart opening. Yes, that's beautiful. But if you bring in the pleasure of the breasts and reconnect that to the heart, oh my gosh, it's so powerful. And you could see this in the ancient goddess traditions, civilizations of say Minoan Crete, where the snake goddess might be somewhat some a figure most people are familiar with, but she's bare-breasted. And she has like two snakes, right? So it's like this, she's a priestess in ceremony, bare-breasted, and we often think breasts are, for feeding babies, which is beautiful. My daughter-in-law has an infant right now. It's such a beautiful thing. However, there's so much spiritual power to the breasts when we start to awaken the pleasure. And this is something I think the ancients knew, and also the yoni, of course, and the womb space, the womb. So even if a woman doesn't have even her physical breasts or her physical womb, the energetic blueprint is still there, and that portal in for her to experience her own direct line to her divinity is there. And again, it's this experience that practices can bring you there, but it's something like that can't be taught, say, in university or yeah. It's a different kind of knowing, a different kind of knowledge, embodied knowledge, and yeah, I experience that as divine. And when a woman starts to awaken her body in that way, pleasure is the portal. I say that a million times, probably in a week. But pleasure is the portal. When we're really receiving that pleasure, you just feel this essence, this deeper essence of who you are. And I consider that to be a woman's inner goddess, and more specifically, her inner Venus.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. That was so well put, and the way you described it was just beautiful, with describing the body as sacred and reconnecting with the idea that our
Mhm.
bodies are sacred. And for anyone listening who doesn't quite understand or doesn't feel connected to this inner knowing or connected to their inner goddess, do you have any suggestions where someone could start if they want to connect with their inner goddess and recognize and feel
Mhm.
and see her?
Yeah. Slowing down. Slowing down and finding it's really like a mindfulness practice, really finding the pleasure of the present moment. Yeah, we call this Zen pleasure, if you will, but just literally like it's springtime where I live now, when the sun is out, just sitting in the sun and just really receiving the feeling of warmth on my skin. That can really bring somebody there. Or again, essential oils are just really receiving instead of like sniffing something, right? Just really can you open to receive the beauty of it? Or even a beautiful sunset, same thing. Just and many of the women, when they first meet me, we go through this little process where I bring them into an experience where they had that experience of that relaxed pleasure. Usually when they're on vacation or they're chilled out, and quite often when they're alone in nature, I find when you're walking on the beach and you feel safe enough, right, to drop in, that those are those moments. Start to view those as sacred because you just come into this different knowing, don't you? You get your best ideas when you're in that space. You just like your intuition turns on. You literally have shifted paradigms. You just don't realize it. But the more you realize it and recognize it, the more those experiences happen and they get stronger. It's a frequency. So when you are, in especially nature, near a waterfall on the beach or just sitting in the backyard, and you're just in that rapturous state, for no reason. You're just like, oh my God, I feel safe. I see the beauty around me. I feel the beauty. I feel my own beauty. That brings us into our inner Venus. And what I see with women, I'm thinking of something one of my clients says after I walked her through this process. She's like, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I could just imagine myself on the beach, feet in the sand, sun on my skin, and boom, I'm there. And she like turns on her own genius that way, right? In that divine way. But it's so beautiful to see. I like to think of it as these innate codes that live inside of us. It's all there. Like it's not something that someone can put on you or, cookie cutter and all of that. But when a woman is in that state of pleasure, you can start to milk that even. You start to awaken what I call the Venus codes, which are beauty. You could substitute the word radiance if beauty's too triggering, but beauty, abundance, she knows her worth, passion, she just feels that desire, that innate desire, and bliss. You could also use the word ecstasy and love. And I think all of these things are things we've been trained to search for outside of ourselves, and they're really sacred codes that actually live within us. And the more a woman cultivates her pleasure, the more she be like, oh my God, I am beauty. I'm not beautiful. I am beautiful, but I am beauty, like, or I am abundance. All of those things. She starts to, it's a remembrance. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my goodness. I love that you just brought up this idea that so many of us are looking for these things outside of ourselves. We're looking
Mhm.
to feel like we are love or to feel like we are radiance or beauty from a means outside of ourselves, for
Yeah.
perhaps someone telling us that or reassuring us or feeling it from a connection with another person. And that's something I've been thinking about a lot recently is no matter what I do, it never feels fully whole or full. No matter
Mhm.
how magical the person outside of me is, it has to come from within. Like you said, it has to come from our own inner knowing, our own realization that we just are love and we just are beauty, and we don't need that
Yeah.
reassurance from, perhaps we like the reassurance from someone
Oh,
outside of
sure. It's
ourselves.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's not the
Mhm.
whole of what it is. So I love that you just touched on that. That was beautiful.
That's great, Brielle. I love the way you said that.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
you're just, oh, you're awesome. And I know that a big part of your work is the jade egg practice, and you mentioned that a
Mhm.
bit earlier. I'd love if we could just dive in a little bit about that. I know it's
Oh,
something you
yeah.
teach a lot, and anything you could share about the beauty and magic and um,
Mhm.
power behind the jade egg practice.
I love it. Yes. Well, this is where I get to say I am unapologetically woo. I'm coming out as woo. So,
Yes.
and I mean, science is great. I have so much respect. My husband's an MD. I mean, a lot of my friends are medical doctors. But if they don't have respect for the mystical, I just, conversation ends there. Um, because I feel like there's so much that science can do for us, and there's so much that science can't do for us. And one of the things I love so much about the jade egg practice is that it can start to awaken it. Now, the magic is not in the crystal. I'll just break it down in case someone's new to what is the jade egg practice. It actually is a piece of jade or crystal carved in the shape of an egg that you can use internally, a woman can use internally in her vagina, her yoni to awaken. So definitely tone, but it's not just a Kegel. And sometimes you see it marketed as a Kegel egg. That drives me crazy because it's just so much more. And it's really misunderstood. It's a yoga practice. And it's a mindfulness practice, and it's a tool of transformation. And sure, crystal energy is beautiful, but the magic is in you. And the way we use it again is very mindful. And over time, it can start to help us release stuck emotion, stuck stored stress, tension, and trauma from the body, and restore this natural sacredness of the body, because that's all that's blocking us from feeling it is all the stored tension and trauma and emotion, which is significant. And so, gentle approach, soft approach is absolutely key. It's definitely not about just, popping a crystal in your vagina and hoping for the best. There's definitely a protocol. And yeah, it really is about self love. Our foundational practices are all about that, really connecting with the breath. I use breath work a lot, sensual breath work to downregulate the nervous system and getting that mind body connection back. And this is where it comes more into exercise science. I am a former Pilates teacher, so I love the precision toning of it. So there's a value to that as well, to speak to that, because when we're using something tangible like the egg, it reconnects the brain to this part of the body. Because of trauma and just a disconnect, we tend to get numb and not feel all the pleasure that's available. So the jade egg practice can absolutely turn that around. And I teach a very movement centric approach where we do micro moves for dexterity, because that's so wonderful for enlivening, awakening this energy, like from the sacred perspective, but also retoning the tissue density, the succulence. I love that word. It could also repattern any negative experiences we've had with penetration, which I think is so important. I think almost every woman I've ever met has had experiences. And like, what do we do with that? How do we move that out of the body? And the practices, not just the egg, but we use also sounding. There are Taoist healing sounds that help release, stored energy. So it's definitely, as much as it is physical, it's also energetic and spiritual, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think it's really important to keep in mind you mentioned that it's not just popping a crystal into our vagina. Like that's not that's not
Right.
it. There's so much more to it and so many things that can come about if we, it sounds like, practice this really consciously and,
Yeah.
put the time into really being with ourselves, being in our body, exploring, letting go, all of those
Yes.
things. So yeah, I loved hearing some more about that.
I like to call it making love to crystals.
Yes.
Because again, it's not just about, the crystal's going to do the work. It's more about like, can I receive this? Can I be with this? Can I be present with this? All of this, weaves into reclaiming the sacredness of the body and our sensuality. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It sounds like it comes right back around to also just remembering at all times that we are love and we are radiance and we are beauty and whatever other terms we want to
Yes.
use. It's the crystal is not going to bring that to us. We already have that. It might just help us along the way. So,
Help us
yeah.
awaken it. I love that. One of the first things I have women do is to create a Venus mantra. Exactly that. Yeah, I am beauty, I am love, or whatever speaks most to them. But yeah, that's a great point, Braille.
Yeah. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Any point I have made is because of your lovely knowledge and insights.
Oh,
So I really appreciate you sharing so much today.
yeah.
And before we get into talking a little bit more about your work and how people can work with you, I'd love to ask you
Mhm.
one other question, just kind of a recap for any women who have reached midlife or are going through menopause or maybe even any stage and age in life who are just feeling like this is the end to their sexuality or their
Mhm.
sensual life, it's over, or have disempowering beliefs around it. What would you say to those people? Are there just could you uncover some misconceptions that people might be having? Anything you could share to bring some hope to anyone who's feeling a bit disempowered?
Oh my gosh, yeah, the messaging is crazy.
Mhm.
It really is. The whole put out to pasture thing has so many women feeling invisible, which I just say, don't take the bait is number one. Don't take the bait. Realize your intuition that there is more, that there should be more. Even if you're thinking there should be more, you're spot on, even if you don't really believe it yet. Like, yeah, that's a nugget that you want to fan the flames of that, because that's your desire speaking, and your desire is sacred. But yeah, there's so much that can mislead a woman and really feel like that. But my experience has been, I now call menopause the passion portal. I mean, it's my whole orgasmic life started at menopause. And in Taoist tradition, they understand that it's a very powerful time for a woman where she can really focus on herself, maybe built the career, had the family is maybe they're still around, but they're almost out the door kind of thing. But like you could really reclaim your body maybe for the first time. That's what it was for me. And I feel that all of our experience, actually, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever, is actually raw material to alchemize. It's energy that you can transmute into orgasm and ecstasy, I guess is the most succinct way to say that. But yeah, just know that there's more, and it can be super simple the way you start, just knowing there's more. And just in little ways weaving pleasure, into your day, starting to really see yourself as a sensual being and living in this beautiful temple of your body more, even if it's just like little things you do can make such a difference. If you love silk, wear a silk scarf and just feel that on your skin. Again, if you love scents, really dive into essential oils, not for necessarily the benefits you're going to get, but just for the pleasure, you know? Yeah.
Mm.
Little things like that can be huge in shifting the way you're viewing it. Yeah.
For sure. Amazing. Thank you
Mhm.
so much for that. That
Sure.
was so full of hope, and I love that you really put so much emphasis on this idea of staying with that feeling. If we feel like there's something more, staying with it and not trying to push it down or get away from it or tell ourselves, "Oh, this is enough." There is
Right.
more and we can go for that more. So I love, love, love that.
Yep. And you can start gathering evidence through your own experience
Yeah,
of that more. Yeah.
for
Hmm.
sure. Yes.
Yeah.
And speaking of more, I'd love if we could talk more about how people can work with you, Diane. If anything that you'd like to share with us about how people can find you, any resources you have, how people can work with you,
Oh,
anything else that you'd
sure.
like to share with us.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Yes. Well, I run a sacred feminine mystery school where we focus on all these things. And what I developed is a free resource library that's packed with stuff. And if you go in there, packed with practices and tools, I should say, not stuff. Um, it could be a little overwhelming, but I wanted to create like a banquet of choices for women because we're all different and what you're going to be drawn to. So you'll find all kinds of guided rituals and master classes there. There's one on making love to crystals, actually, if you're interested in the jade egg practice. There's one on sensual breath work. There's one on sensual movements. Again, there's a whole um, a buffet there to choose from, and that's called the Goddess Vault. We'll make sure we link that. And that's a great place to start. And it's connected to my podcast. I have a podcast called the Vital Goddess Podcast. And I always refer to the Goddess Vault when I speak on the podcast because for women to kind of understand what I'm saying, it's going to be so helpful if you have some kind of embodiment practice going for yourself. Because otherwise, if we're thinking from more of the left brain, trying to figure it out, does that make sense, that kind of thing, it's going to be hard to really feel into your own essence. So even the simplest of practices will really help. So the podcast and the free library kind of go together in that way. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Yeah. So I always try to encourage women to hop into something, and start the conversation with yourself. And then I also have my school, my mystery school is the Vital Goddess Mastermind, and we meet on a basis. We're just wrapping up our spring semester now. We just have a few more weeks to go, and it's been amazing. And so yeah, we meet every Wednesday night and dive into all these kinds of topics, and I guide women through practices because I feel like that is so valuable. That's how I learned too, to being guided through these different practices by women who have been doing it for a while. And yeah, so I've been just really loving sharing that with women as well. Mm.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for creating all these amazing resources and offering them with the world. And as a quick reminder for our listeners today, please go and check out Diane's website. The link over to it is in the show notes, and you can explore all those free resources, her podcast, or maybe even that school. I love the idea of learning about something so empowering. I like in a school, quote unquote, school way. That's awesome. So thank you
Yeah,
for that.
it's like Venus,
Amazing.
Venus school.
Yes, I love, love, love that as someone
Oh,
who,
cool.
loves to learn. So that's awesome.
Oh, cool.
And do you have any final thoughts or a final message that you would like to leave us with today, Diane?
Mm. I'm just so grateful for this opportunity, and I feel like we are at an interesting point in human history right now, and I feel the feminine is rising. I know that's so cliche, but, but I feel like what's so important to remember that is that energy that wants to be rebirthed in the world, I feel. It's been missing for 3,600 years-ish. It happens through us. It happens through the sacredness of our bodies. And yeah. So it's about that. And it's so different from, academia, that kind of study. It's a different kind of study, the body study of like coming in and getting our own direct experience. And it's like, yes, it's personal, but I also feel like it's very collective also. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Mm.
That's such a fun little takeaway to consider this collectiveness and we're all in this together as women exploring and
Yep.
growing and connecting with our
Mm.
sexuality and our sensuality. I almost just combined those two words. But
Yes.
yes,
And the
that
more we
was
connect, the safer we feel. Yeah.
yes, for
So
sure.
true. Yeah.
Yes, I'm so glad I got to connect with you today, Diane, and thank you so much for joining me on the podcast and sharing so many amazing insights. It was wonderful speaking with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Brielle. It's been my pleasure.
Yes, it's been my pleasure as well. And to our shame-free listeners, thank you for being here with us today and taking your next step in embracing your most authentic, powerful, feminine, shame-free self. Stay sexy, stay safe, stay curious. Take care, everyone. Explore more at shamefreesex.com. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so that you never miss out on another episode. Bye, everyone.